Hi, I'm Rachel. I'm 47 years old, and in the last 2 years, I've lost over 150 pounds. If you had told me 3 years ago that I would willingly fast regularly and that it would change my life for the better, I would have been skeptical and maybe I would not have believed it. For most of my life, I was taught that eating every few hours helped keep my metabolism running. I even had a doctor tell me at one point that I needed to eat 4 to 6 small meals throughout the day, and that not doing so was the reason I wasn't losing more weight. And yet, today, fasting is one of the most important tools I use to maintain my health and continue losing weight. And I have a doctor now who is very supportive, thankfully. In fact, I really can't imagine living any other way now than fasting regularly. So in this video, I want to tell you how I accidentally stumbled into intermittent fasting while road tripping through one of America's most remote and beautiful national parks, and why it became such a game changer for me. This part of my story actually begins during my trip to Great Basin National Park. At that point, I'd already lost about 75 pounds. I was reading Dr. Jason Fung's The Obesity Code during downtime on the trip. And I had recently started following a strict ketogenic diet after hitting a long and frustrating plateau. A few weeks earlier, I had been stuck at around 285 pounds for roughly 3 months. The scale simply refused to budge. I had already cleaned up my diet significantly. I was avoiding ultra processed foods. I was eating smaller portions. I was doing all the things people tell you to do. And yet, nothing more was happening. I remember feeling frustrated because I was working hard and genuinely trying, and I'd been here before. Part of me worried that I had reached the point where my body simply wasn't going to lose any more weight. Then I discovered Dr. Jason Fung's work through a weight loss discussion group online. After reading about insulin resistance and ketogenic diets, I decided to give keto another try after having struggled a great deal with it in the past. Now, I want to be honest, the transition to keto was not fun. I got what many people call the keto flu, and it had led me to stop keto in the past, thinking it just didn't agree with me. Headaches, muscle cramps, fatigue, low energy, nausea, brain fog. I just felt off. The closest comparison I can make is feeling like I'd overdone it the night before back in my 20s. I almost quit keto this time, but then the weight started moving again, so I stuck it out. Within a matter of weeks, I had lost another 10 pounds. And for the first time in months, I felt hopeful again. Looking back, I think those weeks accomplished something important. They helped my body become more comfortable burning stored fat for energy instead of constantly relying on incoming carbohydrates. And that ended up making my transition to fasting much easier than I expected. While I was still on that Great Basin trip, I reached the fasting chapters of the Obesity Code. And because we were traveling in a van with a small cooler, food logistics were a little inconvenient. Restaurant meals were expensive. We were in a rural area. Shopping for food regularly was a hassle. So I thought, maybe I'll try this fasting thing now. Nothing dramatic. I simply stopped eating breakfast. I cut out snacks. And I ate 2 meals a day. That was it. I started with something close to a 16-8 schedule and gradually moved towards an 18-6. That means, respectively, 16 hours of fasting, an 8-hour eating window, or 18 hours of fasting with a 6-hour eating window. And what surprised me was how normal it felt. Actually, that's not quite true. It felt better than normal and very natural to me. I noticed I felt mentally sharper during long drives. I felt more alert, more clear headed. I had steady energy while hiking. And perhaps the strangest thing was that I wasn't spending all day constantly thinking about food. For years, I had been told that eating frequently was healthy, that skipping meals would slow my metabolism even further, that breakfast was absolutely essential to prevent me from becoming even heavier. But my body seemed to have a very different opinion. I think several things made the transition easier for me. First, the medication was beginning to work in full force. It significantly reduced my hunger and food noise. Second, I had already gone through the most difficult metabolic adjustment while I was transitioning to keto. I was fat adapted by now. The keto flu had been the hard part. Intermittent fasting felt comparatively easy. And third, I've never really been a natural breakfast eater. In fact, this was one of the funniest realizations for me. When I was a teenager, my dad encouraged me to eat breakfast every morning because that was considered healthy advice to keep weight off at the time. He meant well, he genuinely wanted to help me, but I never liked eating first thing in the morning. I wasn't hungry. I was forcing myself to do it because I believed I should. Otherwise, I was afraid I would gain more weight. It took me years to get used to eating breakfast, and then only a couple of days to get used to not eating it. That realization made me laugh. I had spent years forcing myself into an eating pattern that my body never seemed to want in the first place. As the weeks passed, something became increasingly clear. My body genuinely seemed to prefer eating this way. 2 meals per day felt simple, comfortable, and sustainable. I no longer felt chained to constant meal planning, snacks, and eating schedules. Instead of feeling deprived, I felt liberated. And over time, the results continued. The weight kept coming off. I've averaged roughly 10 pounds per month since incorporating fasting into my overall strategy. Today, I'm not nearly as strict with keto as I was in the beginning. I'm more keto ish. I can now eat moderate amounts of carbohydrates, especially whole food carbs paired with protein and healthy fats, without seeing the dramatic responses on the scale that I once experienced. I will sometimes have a small dessert after a meal, and I still continue losing weight. I can enjoy little splurges in moderation now, which really helps with social situations, with less anxiety around triggering more cravings, spinning out of control, or how it will affect my metabolism. But intermittent fasting has remained. Of all the habits I've adopted, it's one of the few that feels so natural now that I genuinely can't imagine going back. Now, I do want to emphasize something important. The type of fasting I've talked about today, intermittent fasting, schedules like 16-8 or 18-6, is where I believe most people should start. It's also an approach that many people use successfully for maintenance of weight loss and long term health. But for me, losing a very large amount of weight eventually required going beyond intermittent fasting, and I eventually began experimenting with longer fasts. And that's where things got much more challenging. That's also where some of the biggest benefits happened. And in the next video, I'll talk about my first experiences with extended fasting, what went wrong, what surprised me, what I learned, and how I gradually built the confidence to spend longer periods of time without eating. If fasting sounds intimidating, don't worry. I was once doubtful too. But as you'll see in the next video, the journey into the deep end happened one small step at a time. So to recap, here's what I found very helpful to start with intermittent fasting. 2 meals per day, no snacks or eating between meals. Eat each meal until feeling comfortably satisfied rather than uncomfortably full. If you found this helpful, please subscribe and let me know in the comments. Have you ever tried intermittent fasting? And if not, what part of it seems most intimidating to you? Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.